Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the relentless geekery.
Good morning, where are you at? You look like you're in Venice.
And actually, I chose that background to indicate I'm in California. I'm out in Oceanside. And as you might have been reading, for the last month, California has been getting atmospheric rivers that dump just a ton of rain. And mostly it's been upstate. And so all the way up by like Ukiah and Eureka and of course, Sacramento. There's been little towns that had one road left in and out. It was so flooded. I'm all the way down in the south. I'm actually between LA and San Diego. Yet I'm going to be out here for a week, and my first 4 days have been rain every day.
Wow.
Much different than usually I come out to California and it's 30 in Cleveland and it's 72 and beautiful out here. And I guess it's a little bit worth talking about because whenever there's things like this, it's just so humbling. I live a relatively safe and virtual life. I live in Lakewood, Ohio, and the roads are good and everything, snow gets cleaned up. But once in a while, nature like shrugs its shoulders and lets you know who's really boss. This rain here has been unending, and they've had flooding and mudslides and power outs and all kinds of disruptions to services. And sadly, precipitated, haha, by global warming, where there's so many changes now that not only the bad droughts, but the bad floods and the bad tornadoes and the bad hurricanes. It's all these big disruptions of weather patterns. And I don't think we've seen but the start of how bad it's going to get in terms of not 100-year storm is going to happen like every 3 years instead of every 100.
And worse, I know when I lived in California, I was driving on the freeway. It's 70 most places there. And suddenly everybody's hitting their brakes and slowing down like 45. And I'm like, oh, is there an accident? I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Here it was misting, raining lightly. They're so not used to having the rain that they reacted much more strongly than we do here. Here we're like, oh, it's just a torrential downpour. We can drive to 5. And it's like in Texas, when they get a light dusting of snow, it's like everything shuts down. Nobody can go anywhere. And we're like, really? We've got 8 feet here. We're good. And it's just what you're used to.
I'll tell you, it isn't only a disaster. They had a really bad drought for, I think, the last 15 going on 20 years. So you might have seen also those pictures where all the various different reservoirs and lakes were so low that they were discovering like ancient American Indian carvings on things, and also discovering like cars that had been driven into the reservoir, bodies in cars where somebody had been tragically died or disposed of, where they thought they might have been like a crime finally solved and that kind of stuff. So because of this incredible rain, they've got incredible snowpack in the mountains in the Sierra Nevadas, 6 feet when they usually have 2. And that'll not only are the reservoirs filling from the rain, but that'll help to get everything recovering as that snowpack melts as the year goes by. So here's hoping that again, it isn't only that they have it, it's that they have to manage it if the snow melt is so much that causes another round of flooding or canals overflowing and stuff like that. And especially, I feel really bad and sad where people that have lived all their life and this isn't a flood zone, I don't have to worry about that. So they don't have anything in place for how to sluice the water away to the correct places. You might have had this when we had some of this in the Midwest. Colleen and I actually happened to be traveling. We were going across Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, where it's so flat that you can like stand on a chair and see a third of the state. You know what I mean? It's really flat there. Then when you get flooding, you might have only like an inch of water, but it is miles and miles across things because it doesn't have any gullies and creeks to go into. So I don't know what's going to happen here anywhere that there's a desert. part of the reason that they get mudslides or other things is that it doesn't soak into the ground. The ground is so drought packed, and it's like it might be carving new paths and stuff like that. We're still finding out just how much it's going to alter the landscape. Is it going to carve a whole new bend to the river?
Right.
Because you know, it's so it's kind of fascinating that these are the kinds of things that in the history books you get to read about. Hey, there was an earthquake and the Mississippi jumped its banks and carved a new course and stuff.
Right.
Happening now, it's like apocryphal times, and not in the Bible way. We're not getting punished for anything. That's always a sad thing to see, is the people that are talking
Right.
about, oh, that's punishment for, you know, a bad state. It's like, oh, you mean when it happens in Louisiana and Texas and the other Bible thumper states, that's
Right.
not God's
Well,
as well. But
if it's
why do I
any
even say
consolation,
that?
if it's any consolation, we've got rain going on here too. Expected rain tomorrow, so you're not
Okay.
missing anything. And this,
Yeah.
I know it sounds a little silly, but if you've ever played SimCity or Civilization, these types of things are built into the games, and you have to sometimes learn to deal with them. Now, I'm not saying, oh, we know how to handle this now, and I could do planning for a city. I'm not saying that at all, but it gives you a
Right.
understanding, and you think about it and respect. It's like, if I put my house here and it's right by the river and we do get a flood, that house is going away. It lowers the property values and people move out, and then they're, it's a sim. It gives you an idea, but definitely not real life. I understand that.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Civilization, and I have played it in so many different, the archipelagos, the Pangea type continents, the islands, and all and also you play it based on where it is along in our ecological history. So when I've played it really old, all you'll have, wow, my city is really thriving, and then all of a sudden a volcano erupts next to it
Right.
and wipes it out. And that really is historically, that's Etna going off. That's we have had earthquakes, and I don't know that the game has like the earthquake makes the tsunami happen built into it. I haven't seen those kinds of things. Maybe the more current versions do it. I'm not aware, because I tend to play, I'm always lagging like one or two because I get into that sweet spot of it's
1
fun
or 2
as well
decades,
as
you
a
mean?
challenge. It's funny. It really is. So my favorite version, I think it's up to Civilization 6. And I often, when I want to just have a soothing game, I go into Civilization 3, where I really understand the entire progress tree and stuff like that, and the various different competing tribes. And just that, it, but I'm still, when I get that, when it's, oh, I just lost my city to a volcano, that doesn't happen nowadays until we
It
find
does.
out Hawaii has stuff going on right now. A friend just posted a picture of it, like a rock is like nothing else. Imagine the heat coming off of that. And he posted a picture that looked like he was kind of like looking down into the cone of a volcano. And he said, actually, he was about a mile away, but it was just this amazing infernal plane of new earth being formed, new rock being formed by stuff bubbling up. And as you know, we've got our own possibilities of the super volcano that's
Right.
underneath Yellowstone. And that's what I mentioned. I've been close just to geysers and mud pots and stuff like that, and they're giving off their own incredible intense heat and smell. And what's that like to have it be a real volcano? I don't want to find that out here in the United States, because that's going to do all kinds of stuff, right? It's not going to have the big cone there, but it's going to start putting ejecta up into the atmosphere, and who knows how that's going to affect weather patterns, like
Right.
Not Kilimanjaro, Krakatoa
Right.
blowing up, and apparently it affected the weather in the world for a whole year of jet stream effects as it made its way around the globe. So just to go back to my initial statement, it's really interesting to see nature cause these big things to happen, and in some cases, unfortunately, aided by man. But it really can be that just this is a wet year, and we're going to find out what crops make it, even if they're immersed. And I think we already know that, but we didn't plan for that. If we've got the Central Valley of California is much the breadbasket's not the right word, because it has more crops, nuts, all different kinds of things. What happens when that gets disrupted? And we do without avocados for a year. And that doesn't seem to be a big thing. Avocados, it's not like wheat where it's the staple of our, but think of how many ways we've integrated all the nuts, all the various different crops that come
Right.
out of here and we're going to take off
Well,
for a year.
how is it affecting like the insects, like some of the bees and stuff in that area? What's it going to
Boy,
do
howdy.
for things like that? And people
Exactly.
disregard and don't think of those things because, oh, it seems insignificant, but it can have a huge impact and totally change 10, 20 years from now, have completely different flora, fauna, and animals in that area because of this 1, 3, 5 day week or whatever.
You're exactly right. There's ripple effects as to if that thing gets disrupted, then what are all the other crops that depend on it, and insects, flora and fauna, like you said, that depend on it, or at least that it all integrates. I don't know. It's scary and fascinating all at the same time. So mine consists of, I'm in a hotel, a Best Western, and it's a nice California hotel. So they're not designed for flooding. They had to put extra mats outside mine and other rooms to make sure that before I stepped into my room, I wasn't stepping in a puddle. It's just enough of a little downslope, and luckily my room is high enough off the ground that I didn't have water coming into my room. But the first night I got here, when it was really torrential rain, I actually put a towel up against my door because I didn't want to get up in the middle of the night and like go step on my rug. That's I it's it's nice. Let me think how to say this. I'm safe. I don't think that I'm really going to get flooded out, so I'm getting to observe it instead of participate in it. But it's not that way. Wow. Best wishes and hope for everybody up in the northern parts of the state. One of the biggest things I read lately, the Sonoma and Napa valleys are now in a lot of danger of flooding.
I was
And
going to
as
say,
you know,
what's that
that's
going to do
our
for?
wine country, the United States wine country. So who knows what that's going to do to this entire vintage, if you will, and the entire economy that's based on that.
Right.
It's
Wine is
it's
good. Plants getting water is good, but they can only take so much. Even us, if we over drink water, it can actually put your system in an imbalance and kill you. So people don't think that water, other than drowning, can kill you, but too much of any of it. Plants are the same way. There's some that are very sensitive to too much water. And if you read house plants, don't overwater. You got to put certain things in the soil to keep their roots from molding and things. And then there's other plants that soak it up and love it and will flourish. That just, besides mold being in all these hotels and everywhere else now.
Exactly. I guess we're all going to learn about it together. They didn't have to worry about it, that it was so dusty that they were worried about viruses that because it's so dry, they get born on the air. And now instead it's going to be like molds and funguses that thrive in moisture places. And the environmental impacts are going to be amazing. I don't know. I know that wasn't the series called The Last of Us is apparently it's an adaptation from a video game.
Yes, a very good video game.
But apparently the villain, if you will, is one of those fungi that like sporulates and takes over creatures. And wow, if we really start to have that, it doesn't just take over cats, but takes over people and makes you climb high so that when it sporulates and your head blows, it goes as far as it can on the wind. It's not going to really happen monster movie wise, but it will happen on that small scale of everywhere that you get black mold in your basement, there'll be more of it. Yeah. Everywhere that there's crops and things that are affected, that are spoiled by, wow, bread is rotting in 3 days instead of 5 or something like that. It really will. Environmental impacts are still to be seen in lots of ways.
Right.
Oh,
so you mentioned Last of Us, and it's not out yet, but I'm very excited for that show because I love the video game. The video game is, we've talked a little bit about it, some of my workshops and my talks with parents and that, and Last of Us is the great, perfect example of what I'm talking about, that as a video game, it is very story based, that you are getting a story, you're not just through cutscenes, but your play and what you do and how you act. There have been games in the past like Fable and a few others where you can act good or evil. This isn't quite like that, but definitely the way you act affects the gameplay. And the opening sequence that you play through is one of the most powerful opening sequences as far as story goes. It rivals some of the most powerful movies and books that I've ever read, that opening sequence. So I'm very excited to see how they go with the show.
Yeah, I guess I must admit, I'm one of those guys that I really hate to, like, I like to read the book before I see the movie because I guess I like the book format better. I make my own pretty pictures in my mind, and then I compare the movie as to what it's going to be
Right.
like. And should I seek out a copy of this game and try to play some of it before going into the show and see how it captures it well and stuff like that? What do you
Well,
think?
I would say yes, but I think you can only get it on PlayStation. So unless you want to go buy a
Oh,
PlayStation 3, you're probably
yes,
not going to,
yes,
or ask your nephews, see if one of them have a copy of you.
exactly. Damn you, platform
Right.
dependence.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. I don't think it's on Steam or Windows at all. I think it is only
okay.
PlayStation. I think they've remastered it for PlayStation 4. I wouldn't doubt if it gets a PlayStation 5 remaster now also.
Yeah, I'm curious, and this is a whole big topic. So there's always that cross pollination, that things where they're trying to make it that, hey, if it was successful here, can we make a Broadway musical out of a movie? Can we make a movie out of a video game? That kind of thing. I guess I'm also looking for, have they done it? There's been many things where people talked about they made Mortal Kombat into a movie, and it was total cheesecake. It was not
Yeah.
as it's hard to capture what makes a game successful in a movie necessarily, but let's see, what's the series with Underworld? Maybe that was a video game first. No, there's any number of things where it's actually turned into there's 4 movies on it. So apparently
Evil.
Resident Evil
And
with Mila Jovovich, right?
yes,
Exactly.
yes.
So hopefully the game was good enough and the movie made of it was either good enough or the people that are so loyal to that series that they're going to see no matter what movie they put out. But I'm kind of happy when it actually is not, oh, what a cash in. Since just last week was, hey, how about selling out? I don't want it to be that they just slavishly make a copy, that they actually say, well, we're in a different medium now. How about if we see what we can do to be at least different than and maybe better than where we came from?
The Resident Evil movies definitely have a different feel than the games, as far as I'm concerned. But what makes me hopeful with Last of Us is it is very much a story-based game, that the story matters. Mortal Kombat, what's the story? Oh, we're in a tournament, we're fighting to the death, I got to kill 10 of them. There's the story. Let's make a movie out of that.
Very artificial. There's no in plot. There's no, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Okay.
So with this, they have a lot of material already to work with, and they're doing it as a series, not just a 2-hour movie. And I've talked a lot on my Wordsmith podcast with authors that the new version of TV, where it's treated as like mini series that are 8 to 12 episodes long, usually, that's totally different than what TV used to be. So it really focuses on, let's get a good story, let's tell it well with good characters, and when they really hit that just right, it's amazing. You get some great stuff, and I would argue better than a lot of movies. So I'm very excited to see the show.
We've talked about that before, where they, comic book movie wise, how do you compress 90 years worth of mythology into what exact elements are you going to fit into that 2.5 hour movie? And a lot of times it's been, you don't need to have 6 villains in the movie. You could really just have one great one instead, or the compression of the origin. If anything, each time you do the movie, you don't have to retell the origin. You can make it that the people who saw the first one are still with you and they want to see a new story, not a third of it rehashed. So TV is a much better medium for that it's episodic by its nature, and that, I don't know, just like comic books, and maybe a little bit like video games, as you go from phase to phase, there's often a cliffhanger ending. There's often some satisfaction having achieved a small goal, but there's still the main goal to be done. And so I'm sure that at the cool story writing conferences that you've been to, they talk to you about character arcs and story beats and things like that. And how do you make the big wall that has all the little colored post-its that say, okay, here's where we're going to start, and then here's the divergence, and we come back in, here's the main line, here's the various side quests and stuff. I love that there's not a straitjacket, but at least some science, some organization to how to write a compelling story like that. It's cool. I don't think it makes them the same because the conflicts and the characters are always different, but it's cool that they know how to do it. Let's keep building tension and then a little bit of release with humor and whatever
Right.
else it might be.
And you just touched on such a perfect spot that intersects with writing and music too. That, you know, book authors quite often, the more newbie usually, and I'm not saying I'm experienced, the best. Okay, I've been doing it for a couple years, but what I've noticed is the more newbie they are, oh, I want to do something different. I want to stand out. And what really happens is if you go too far out of that line, people don't enjoy it because built in internally, we expect stories to be a certain way. We expect certain things to happen. There's got to be that conflict. There's got to be the interest. You got to have things where the hero doesn't always succeed. And there are certain beats and there's actually frameworks, the hero's journey being one of them. Save the cat is another one, and you can use those together. You like that one? Yeah. And it really is, honestly, I talked with J.D. Barker, who has written with James Patterson. So if you're going to talk about anybody who's been successful writing, James Patterson would be the guy. And
exactly. He's got a whole section in the bookstore of him and his collaborations.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, he's a brand. What does he write? He writes James Patterson. But people don't like that. I don't want to be stuck in that framework and told what to do, and it's too methodical. But if you're saying that, then you don't have the experience and you're missing the point. You need to go write some more until you understand that. And music's the same way. If I'm going to do a hair metal song, I want to do something different. I've only got these 12 notes for my scale, and I've only got these 6 chords. I can't make a hair metal song. Yeah, you have to. Hair metal has to have certain elements to make it sound like hair metal. Folk music sounds like folk music. Heavy metal sounds like heavy metal. And the point is, each one of those sounds a certain way. And if you don't make your stuff sound like that, but unique, then nobody wants to hear it. They don't like it. And we talked about sellouts. Maybe sometimes that's what the sellouts do. They try and do something different. But the books are the same way with that, same as music. But you're more successful following the known framework because people want that and they're comfortable with it.
As there's certain expectations of here's the 3-act play. Here's the
right.
I love Doc Savage. He's one of my favorite heroes from growing up. When I read, he's a pulp hero from the 30s and 40s that then got reissued as Bantam paperbacks with great James Bama photorealistic covers. Everything was right about that at that time in my life. Was this is what I want to be reading. And Lester Dent, who the house name for the guy was Kenneth Robeson, but Lester Dent is the guy who really wrote like 160 out of the 180. He actually had the master plan, and they published it of here's how he structures his stories. And it was the introduction of the mystery and the introduction of the characters. And at one point, I remember the particular phrase was something like, the hero gets it in the neck bad. How will he recover? That kind of thing. And I knew that there was a sameness to the stories, but it didn't seem formulaic. It actually seemed, because he was so creative with his characters, his locales, a new villain, a new mystery science threat, or whatever else it might be, that they might have been similarly paced, but they sure didn't seem just like stamping them out. Or maybe it's because I like that kind of pacing. I like that kind of book of where there's a whole bunch of different hassle and mystery, and just when you think the hero might not pull it out, there's a big final heroism, a big final effort, and indeed he comes out on top. And that's, I don't know, I've read books where I was like maybe 50 pages in and went, oh, this is the hero's journey. You know what I mean? Where it's like a young man bound for adventure, and of course he's going to have to, he's going to be an orphan or something like that. He's going to be taken out of his element, and how does he learn and mature? And I laughed about this. For TV, maybe all stories, there's 36 basic plots. It's, boy gets girl, loses girl, whatever else it might be. And after a while, you can identify those. And Colleen will vouch for this. Can't tell you how many times now, we watch a lot of TV together because that's our dinner and then cuddling time. And not only will I say, oh, this is probably going to happen, I will supply like the next line of dialogue. And it's really close. And I'm not trying to show off, but I should like I'm going to Hollywood, because I would be the script doctor that would say, that's exactly what I would have said at the time to make it the right amount of drama, the right amount of humor, that it's in the character's voice and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I haven't anywhere near done it as you have. You've actually written books and stories like that, but I sure have taken in enough of them now that I'm very
Right.
familiar with what should come next in order to make it the right thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of funny.
I did that on Stargate once. I loved Stargate. I love Richard Dean Anderson, everything he's done, Legend, MacGyver,
Yes.
some of the other stuff. And we were watching one episode and they were stuck on an asteroid that got sent hurtling to Earth. And the science geeks are trying to figure it out and resolve things. Jack, Richard Dean Anderson's character, is a military guy. He doesn't know the science. All he knows, he's on an asteroid. He can see the Earth. And he walks up to the view screen and he's looking at it. And I said, hey, I can see my house from here. Literally, I got done and he repeated the exact line. I'm like, that is knowing the character. That is the writers just nailing who that character is, that the people watching it know what that character's thinking. I was very happy with that.
In that stressful situation, he's going to say something sardonic. And yes, exactly. That's funny.
And the thing with the movies, the movie The Last Jedi, one of the number 8 in the series, Colin loves that movie. It's one of his favorite Star Wars. I argue. Now, if you take it as a standalone movie, evaluate it from the hero's journey or the Save the Cat, the framework, and does it hit the beats? Does it give the story points? Do you get the highs and lows? Do you have the 3 acts? You can evaluate all that. Maybe it's great and does all of those things. And he loved the director, thought the director did some wonderful things. My argument was, I don't care. It wasn't a good Star Wars movie. It did not hit the points and feel Star Wars like. It was different and did not go with what the others were. And in the Star Wars context, that made it a bad movie. In the movie making context, it might be a great movie. But again, it may not should have been Star Wars. It should have been something else, maybe.
Yeah. And sometimes you can see that where they shoehorn something a little out of place, a little alien to the main thread of the series and stuff like that. And I don't know, I kind of like that, where even we haven't really talked a lot about Firefly, but how well written that was as like a Western set in space, but then also how aware he was of there were tons of Westerns a generation and a half, 2 generations ago here in the United States. Let's go through all those plots. This is going to be the big showdown with a long-standing rival. This is going to be, we have to get the stagecoach through. This is going to be, we're almost dead, but we have to make it to the water hole. And you could see kind of that really is that old Western now done with ray guns and spaceships and stuff like that. And I guess the reason that some of those were so good is because those stories are compelling. You know what I mean? They're really, their character might die here. They're really isolated. There's so many bullets flying that you can't be a good enough gunfighter to dodge 300 bullets, John Woo style. So very fun to.
Big damn heroes, ain't we just? Love Firefly. You know what I always thought would be wonderful? Yeah. Take the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, hang them high, a few dollars more than that, and redo them as Boba Fett movies. Wouldn't that be absolutely perfect?
Interesting, because that's another thing that I get. It's funny, we're well beyond calling things sellouts. It's very interesting to see things repurposed, and just things off the top of my head. When an artist decides that, like Mark Knopfler did a whole bunch of albums before Dire Straits, then had his Dire Straits period, but then did some were country and western, some were folk, some were guitar instrumental type stuff. And it isn't like that he sold out. It's just that this guy had a lot of music in him in various different genres. And if you only like the Dire Straits arena rock period, then you're not going to like his other stuff. But what's also interesting is even in Dire Straits, like the early Dire Straits albums are quite different than when you get to Brother in Arms. And he got better at his craft. And I guess one of the cool things is when you do a certain kind of craft really well, you make a lot of money and you buy your freedom. You know what I mean? That you get to then do whatever you damn please. And if it only sells 100,000 instead of 1 million copies, like you've already got your platinum album money. that kind of thing. So I regularly follow artists on where they're trying something, where they're going to do a different genre and stuff like that, because I admire their skill, their craft, their curiosity, and I want to see what they're going to do.
And it's interesting you bring him up in that example in regards to our talk on sellouts last week, because I think that's the best solution. Is he did solo stuff and he did what he wanted, but then Dire Straits was separate. So if you like Dire Straits, you don't necessarily expect his solo stuff to be the same, and you're not as upset and disappointed. Dire Straits does what it does, and that fits right into this, that here's how Dire Straits sounds and what we do. If we want to do a different style of music, maybe it should be a different group named differently. And authors do that with pen names. But there's some authors out there that have 3 to 5 pen names because they want to write different styles. J.K. Rowling had a problem when she wrote her adult romance because she used J.K. Rowling and people weren't as happy with it. If she would have used a pen name, even if it was Joanna Rowling or Joanna Rowell or something, and everyone knew who it was, but it was separate. So I think that's a solution right there.
Absolutely. Especially sometimes people are so prolific that it's not only their choice as an artist, it's almost like market forces that say, Stephen King, you can't put out 3 books a year because the current system of how we sell books, get them into stores, hype them, that doesn't match you like just popping out great books. You got to slow down. So that's why he went with Richard Bachman and stuff and various other. And I know that seeing that once in a while, people have to like almost, I'm trying to think who it is in particular, that they reissue books or even put out for the first time things that they had written earlier in their career when they weren't as famous, didn't have maybe the economic power that they had, but you can actually see the style is different. The craft that they had gotten better is different.
Michael Crichton, he wrote as Ed Lang or something like that. It was like crime thriller. And he wrote a medical thriller book too. And then Anne Rice had a few books she wrote under some pseudonym that they re-released.
Charlotte Rampling or something. Maybe that's an actress name, but it's Anne Rampling or something. Yeah. I use a book collecting software from Collectors, and one of the things they just added was like ghostwriter / pseudonym, because some people really want to say, hey, I've read everything that Stephen King ever did, but then you can't just look for Stephen King. You have to look for who else he appeared in as he experimented and stuff like that.
Someone we know that does a lot of that. Bill Keith writes as Ian Douglas, but he's written as Robert Kane. He's written as William Keith, William H. Keith, I believe. So he's got 4 or 5 different ones. If you go to his website, he lists them all. It's not like it's a secret, but he's a perfect example. His Ian Douglas stuff is military, sci-fi, outer space, future usually. He wrote the Army Ranger stuff he did with his brother as Ian Douglas. People probably like, don't want to do that.
Stop doing that. Come back to Where We Love You. Come back to that kind of thing. Because let's see, who does the... It's kind of funny. I'm blanking on names today. I'm not sure why.
It's the rain.
It's the rain, exactly. It's the fungus. Oh my God!
I thought something looked weird about your ears coming out your ears there.
Exactly. I'm sporulating. Every time that I learn like new words like that, it's funny how you think I've never seen that word before, and then you see it like 3 times in print or hear it over the next couple of days, and is it like the universe reinforcing that for me? Is it just because I wasn't aware of it and now I'm hearing it? But
you know what's really difficult? I have an author. Okay, here, a plug. I have an author event at the library on Saturday. There's going to be 4 authors there. We got a table set up. So I'm trying to finish up my study guide to go with my book. It is so hard to look through what I've written, pick out words that maybe like a 4th or 5th grader wouldn't know, and why I chose it, and get the definition for the study guide. Man, that is much more difficult than it sounds.
What an interesting exercise to look at your own work and say, what level reading, and like you said, why did I use this word? Because it's like Mark Twain has a quote about the difference between the right word and the not quite right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. You know what I mean? That it can be really drastically. Yeah.
So you mentioned another thing which made me chuckle. You we just said you noticed stuff multiple times. So the other day, I started watching season 3 of the Jack Ryan show. And then last night on Jeopardy, there was a Tom Clancy question that we got. And then you mentioned, hey, how about Jack Ryan? So I'm like, oh, is he watching the new Jack Ryan series or the
In
third
fact,
season?
I had not been watching it up until the last 2 weeks or something like that. And sometimes some people have a real thing of they don't want to watch it until the whole series is done because they don't like the waiting week by week. Whereas to me, it was just we're watching so many different things nowadays, and some things I watch apart from Colleen, she will watch things we both enjoy up until I don't know 9, 10 o'clock, and then it might be then bath time and bedtime for her. But I still got a couple hours left in me, and actually sometimes she stays and watches more chick-oriented things. And I don't want to care. I so much don't want to see the Banshees of Inisherin, even though it's getting great reviews and so forth. But just that kind of movie about friendships breaking up.
It's a rough movie.
I don't know, irrational reasons and stuff like that. I have things that I know will affect me that I put off until I'm in the right mood. And sometimes the right mood is 10 years later. I know that's a weird Schindler's List. I didn't see for a long time because I knew that it would break my heart and immerse me in a thing that is a very difficult thing to watch.
If you go through a day with work, kids, family, the car, whatever, and it's a stressful day, you really don't want to go see this heavy-handed movie that's going to make you think too hard and get depressed.
I'm looking for escapism instead of historic accuracy.
Right. Me and Colin saw the Banshees. We went and saw Babylon recently, which was interesting. The first 2 hours were wonderful. The last hour was not quite as much, but I understand what they were trying to do, and the movie had its good points. But I was like, dude, every time you pick a movie, it's some really deep art house flick, which great. Appreciate you loving those. But dear God, we got to go see something with explosions next time because I need something different.
So Jack, I like improving myself, but not all the time.
I need to escape. That's what it's for.
Exactly.
So are you watching Jack Ryan? Because I just started season 3, first 2 episodes.
Yeah. The reason, like when I first started them, I had a little, like one of the appeals of Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan is that he's so much an everyman. He's not the Schwarzenegger and like human Terminators of the world. That instead he's an analyst, happens to be a smart guy that finds patterns that he's concerned about, and he does have military background, so he's not useless in a fight. But he isn't that gung ho. I'm going to strap every gun I have onto me and stuff like that. And having said that, even then I wasn't sure. I don't know, Krasinski, like he doesn't strike me as an action hero, and yet I accepted Bruce Willis. I accepted, so I gave it a try, and they're excellent in my opinion. They really are so good about spycraft, tradecraft, about that wilderness of mirrors that John le Carre writes about, that it's really tough to live in a world where you're never quite sure that people are who they are and that they're going to side with you and stay true or betray you, or that they really are good people, but oh no, somebody captured their family and now they're going to do a terrible thing, because there are levels of loyalty, if you will. And all the ways in which it portrays these things are screaming from today's headlines. The first, if I remember right, was about like Middle Eastern conflict and making like a possibility of a plague release and stuff like that. The second one was, and I don't think, no spoilers, like how could we bring the world to the brink of war through misinformation instead of actually shots fired? And just that there are conspiracies in not only Russian government, but our own, and that people's intents are not always clear when they're going in, and that sometimes people, they're loyal, but they go like insane loyal and they're willing to do anything. And that's not, the world has to have some people that will say, I'm not turning that key. I'm not sending missiles to end the world in a nuclear exchange, et cetera, et cetera. So the way they portray, it's not only him, it's this great cast of supporting characters and divided loyalties, and the locales are fantastic. You know what I mean? When you're learning about what's it like to be running around Marrakesh or wherever it might be, that was whole different thing than the streets of New York, where we've had far too many cop shows about. It's a great series. It's
Well,
really great.
Krasinski really does a wonderful job. And I
Yeah.
started watching it and I got hooked on it. It is the seasons are like 8-10 episodes, something like that. It's one story a season. So you really could watch them out of order without too much difficulty. But it is not a cliffhanger ending for every episode like 24 was, or like Game of Thrones and stuff. It's not like every episode has to end on this, oh my God, I got to watch another and eat my popcorn. They're a little more thinking. There is a lot of politics without diminishing the action. It's got just that right mix. It's not, again, like any show, it maybe not be for everybody, but like you said, the everyman, Krasinski pulls it off just as well as Harrison Ford did, or Chris Pine. Actually, I think Krasinski and Harrison Ford did it best out of all three of those actors.
Yeah. I compared a lot. And let's see, what's the one with Matt Damon? Bourne. There's a series of Bourne movies,
Yes.
and like some of the fights in those movies were the most grueling, realistic thing. It's not going to be that people like, hey, fisticuffs and fight by the Marquis of Queensberry rules. They're going to pick up anything they can and beat someone to death with a magazine or something.
Right. Calculating strikes. It was intense scenes.
They're going for maximum damage and hurt the joints and all that kind of stuff, that if you're a military and even like an assassin, you're not worried about anything fair. You're worried about what's the most effective way to take out this guy or this room full of guys. And so I like a lot of that, and especially they really well portray the chaos of it, that it's hardly ever clean, a sniper from far away. It's that there's a convoy, and then they ram the front car with a truck, and then all of a sudden there's just everybody in windows and everywhere coming up running, and the amount, like I said, the number of bullets flying, it's not exhausting, but it really is. Like when it gets done, you're like, oh man, I gotta take a break. There's just so much going on. Another thing that's cool is, because the world is big and the service has any number of different offices, it isn't only that they had a great ensemble cast at the start, that they've been introducing new characters as they've been going on, because now there's not a Tel Aviv office, there's a Moscow office or whatever. So I'm horrible about names today. Michael, who was a big part of, bear with me, great series with, why am I blanking out? He played the aide de camp to the president, the corrupt president, played by, man, I can't believe I'm doing it.
It's been like 4 or 5 years since I've seen the first 2 seasons.
Right.
So
I sometimes this is like my worst episode for this. One of the things that I really like is where people make a career out of playing certain types,
right.
But instead of thinking, oh no, that poor guy's been typecast, I'm really happy when I see that guy plays a great mobster, that guy plays a great cop, that guy plays a great dirty cop. And that when you see Dennis Farina did that very well.
Yes.
He could be really menacing or could be really fatherly, if you will. So seeing like I'm sure that in the casting room, they said something like, I'm going to need somebody like Dennis Farina. And the guy goes, I can get you Dennis Farina.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? And so this, I like when they get that injection, and they're aware of that, not quite typecasting, but at least stereotyping of, we need a guy that he plays by the rules, but he understands that once in a while you have to break them, but he's not going to make it easy. He's not going to say, just go do what you want. He's going to be the one that kind of says, if this doesn't work out, you're going to jail. You're not going to get a medal. You know what I mean? I love that they've got this huge cast, and that almost everybody seems very well placed, very well typed into it and stuff like that.
It's very believable from my viewpoint. I'm sure there's some actual politicians or the CIA or what watching it going, that's not what really happens. But I'm not that, so I like it. Did you ever watch 24 when it was on with Keifer Sutherland?
See, I never did, because I had the idea that it was kind of like an ongoing stunt, that it was done in real time, that every episode had a cliffhanger ending, and that I didn't get into it, and I haven't returned to it to catch up Though from what I understand, there really were
Yes.
some good episodes, some great tension and stuff like that that was built up. So I'm curious.
It,
Another one of
it,
those where it's like, okay, there's how many different seasons, 24 hours. I really am going to be like, wow, I got to dedicate myself to 72 or how many hours of viewing to take in all of
oh
24.
my gosh. It's one of those things. Watch the first season, and if you like it, watch the second. I do know it's one of those that the later seasons didn't have quite the powerful impact that the first couple did, but it was a new experiment when they started. They didn't know how it was going to go. And it there's a lot to it. There's some great characters, like you said. There's some good subplots and interplay. And I thought Kiefer Sutherland was just amazing in the show. And the other show he did that I'd recommend you should go check out, I think it's only 2 seasons, is Designated Survivor. Have you ever watched that one?
I've never watched that one,
Oh,
but another one that I'm really curious about, and it seemed like that it was a lot like what had gone on with 24, but in this case, he's the guy that's supposed to be the one who takes over in case the president and the whole
right.
upper kind of
And he
government
was
gets
like
wiped out, right?
he was like the second undersecretary of plants or something like that. It was just like the lowest guy on the totem pole, and he's the only one left alive, and now he's president. So and
Right.
he does the everyman thing and as president, and people are trying to take advantage of him, and he's handling it, and he's smart, but the problems he faces, and so that's a pretty good show. I mentioned that because I've been trying to get my mother to watch Jack Ryan because she loved the Tom Clancy movies, and she reads Tom Clancy all the time. And she loved Designated Survivor. She's been rewatching that, and her and I watched 24 together back in the day. I introduced her to it. So I've watched 24 all the way through 3 times. So
Interesting. Okay. I will have to look into that. I got to share this with you. I think I mentioned that I had discovered a series, The Gray Man. There was a movie that was
yes,
made with Ryan Reynolds and was not Ryan Reynolds, the
yeah,
other Ryan. God, it's such a
Gosling, wasn't it?
Gosling, exactly. What's
No,
up here?
it was Chris Evans and
Playing a really good villain instead of the
yes,
usual Captain America, etc. That show was so good that I then, oh, it's from a series, and I started those, and I'm now on the 6th or 7th book of the series. Of course, I had to go back and get them and read them in order because
right.
I didn't want to. And they are similar enough to the Jack Ryan series that any number of times when I'm watching on TV or reading my book, it's okay. So who's which is part of which? They were enough because they go to exotic locales and they have a strong supporting cast, and I wasn't losing track, but a number of times I had to say, oh, they'll just call this guy. Oh no, he's in the other series. He's not the guy. And what an interesting thing that they're substantially different. And yet, to go back to our opening discussion, they get story. Get how if you're going to have this pressure cooker, nuclear threat, plague threat, whatever else it might be, there's certain ways to build it so that you keep the little reveals that keep the audience involved, the showing the heroism or the cravenness of various different characters. They're similar enough that I'm like, okay, I'm in 2 different worlds and I have to make the difference between them because they're similar enough that I get not confused, but I'm aware of
Right.
their, especially if I'm almost reading them in parallel. It's like, okay, we're getting to a really exciting place in both of them, which is going to blow up first, that kind of thing. Oh, well.
Okay, so you brought this up too. Beginning of the year, looking at events and all of that. I've been doing the same. And it's funny you mentioned that because I have a post-it note, a sticky note on my desktop I can hide, but it has a list. Beginning of the month, go to these places and check what events are coming up. Different libraries, Lock 3, the Akron Civic, check it, all the online Facebook stuff, different Mensa groups, meetups, see what events are coming up and add them to my calendar. So what are you doing for all that?
So honestly, it's funny. You just said a lot because I know that we really participate in the world. I think we must have similar things. I go through like last year's calendar and say, okay, what did I miss? What did I do last year? And I want to do it again this year. Or we're in an odd place because of COVID that a whole bunch of things that I really haven't enjoyed, not only last year, but 5 years ago, I'm like, wait, when are they going to start Replay FX up again? I really want to go to have my pinball and video game immersion weekend. And there's no sign of it yet. So it's like, okay, check back in once in a while to see whether they're going to take over the a convention center in Pittsburgh, and immediately I'll get, and well, I got my Comic Cons and my pop culture cons and all that kind of stuff. And interestingly, they aren't always on the same weekend. They've been like the Comic Con that is Wizard World / Comic Con, now Fan Expo in Cleveland, has moved from February to March to April. And I'm having to keep track of, okay, now I can't say February's, that last weekend is taken up because that's when that's going to be. No, now it's here. And does that bump into anything? So I regularly check like Cinematique, Cleveland Cinematique, Cinematech, because it should be like Discotheque. What's their upcoming movie lineup and what am I interested in? I'm looking for the Banff Mountain Film Festival, which Colleen and I have so much enjoyed in the past, the Oscar shorts that usually come to the Cleveland cinemas, like the Capitol Theater that we like going to. So same thing, I have a big tickler file of not only be aware of them, but get in early enough so that I'll get tickets. And sometimes they sell out. And so that's really, so for instance, there's an interesting thing coming called Beautifica that is one of those immersive music and light show experiences. It's going to be at the Dome Theater at the Great Lakes Science Center. And maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we went to see a show called Mesmerica that was a similar thing. And this is version 2 of that. And when I first saw it, I went and checked dates, and it was like, oh, exactly the dates they have is I'm in California and we've already got plans with friends or whatever else it might be. And was, man, I really want to see this show. And then you can become aware of, okay, am I willing to look that it's going to be done in Cleveland? Where does it go next? I'll drive to Pittsburgh. I'll drive to Detroit, maybe, that kind of thing. And then make a proposal for, it's not just going to see the show, which seems a little maybe over the top. Let's make a nice weekend out of it and go to Columbus, go to Cosi and that kind of stuff. So having sadly resigned myself to, but then in my mind, I'm also saying, if it's successful, they'll add dates just like the Asian Lantern Festival does. Sometimes they, and indeed, they just released one more weekend here in Cleveland. So on the 27th of this month, I now have tickets to go to Beautifica. And there's a little bit of persistence to that you have to be willing to check back and be disappointed 3 times until the 4th time pays off. But some things, it's okay. I really want to see Little Feat. I love that band. And they're actually going to be like at the Akron Civic Theater and the Lorraine Theater, but they really are exactly on dates that this time around, we're not going to see them. And I'm like, then sometimes, am I willing to move the other thing in order to do this? Oh, it's a show. I already have tickets. So I like having, like you said, I have lists on the computer. Not sometimes it's not Post-its, but I just have the backs of all the desk a day calendars. I use those as my scrap paper, and that'll be my list of, don't forget to do the Mensa annual gathering, do mind games. And I have, here's a bunch of Mensa things I want to look into. When are their gatherings coming up? Here's the comic book things. Here's the science fiction things and our comedy festivals, and trying to make all that work together. Because once in a while it is, man, out of all the year, you guys had to cross program, and I can't go to Toronto the same weekend as I have to be here because I'm once in a while disappointed. Gilda's Laugh Fest is going to be up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I'm like, okay, so that's middle of March. And that's like a 5-hour drive. So then it's not only do the dates work, it's also, all right, that's an investment of time. Am I willing to go there? Well, there's other cool things to do there. You can go to, that eastern side of Lake Michigan, and there's Grand Haven, and there's good mini golf there, but it's March. Will mini golf be open yet? Maybe not. The Lavender Labyrinth is up close to that in a place called Shelby, if I remember right. So then I'm like, oh, I wish that they had it just into April, May, June, when it'll really be in bloom. Because am I going to make that drive twice this year to go see the Labyrinth and Gilda's Laugh Fest? And they haven't announced who's going to be at the Laugh Fest. So I'm like, I'm not going to commit because they might just be like local comedians. But then last year or 2 years ago, I waited too long. And then it was like, oh, Maria Bamford's going to be there. Tickets are gone. Fuck. I would have loved to. I did see her actually in Toronto, but there's a cool thing about seeing people like at a small town festival where it's a smaller venue and they kind of like hang out with you after the show, because what are they going to do in Grand Rapids, Michigan, except be with their adoring fans? So some of those are really great experiences of seeing them in a smaller venue and being part of that cool in crowd that know about it. You know what I mean?
And for me this year, because I do the same thing, especially when the kids were younger, it was like, let's see what's coming up that I could take the kids to, that we could do something together. Now it's like, what do I want to do? And Facebook is really good about showing you lots of events that are similar and that. And
I've done that. I just go into the events thing and I like scroll through and click through. It's interested and let them tell me more about it as the date approaches.
I found a little hack that I was kind of bitching about, and then I realized someone showed me, and I'm like, wow, okay, great. So before with Facebook, I'd go through and I'd interest a lot of things, because then you're in the algorithm and then you could get it and add it to your calendar. You're not necessarily committed if other things come up. You got choices. And then you were able to download one ICS file with all your stuff and import it. And I had a calendar, but they changed that to now where if you export, it's each individual item you have to do. So I just interested 55. Yeah. But what I found out was, because I always did that on my desktop, what I found out is on the app on the phone, there's a setting you turn on that if you interest or say going, it'll automatically add it to your calendar. And I'm like, heck, let's do that.
Honestly, I thank you very much for that, because I've noticed that there's discrepancies between, I have my iCloud stuff all syncs together, except sometimes not. And I'm never aware why it doesn't do it. And like you said, the ICS file that it's supposed to be, that no matter what it comes from, then it should reflect it to every one of my platforms, because I have the phone and the laptop and the desktop. And I'm like, I could swear that I had something going on that day, but now I'm being offered something else. I don't want to commit, but I have to go check something else. That's disconcerting, where you get used to the elegance of the solution and it breaks once in a while. So thank you very much for that, because the phone will be a good way to be able to first get them into my system, and then hopefully it will replicate everywhere.
The one thing I can't figure out, so my Google account with my calendar, I've got several calendars on there. I have an activity calendar that I basically turn off if I want to see my real stuff coming up, doctor's appointments, interviews, whatever. And I turn the activity calendar on to see what's coming up that I might want to do. But the stuff from Facebook just goes to my default calendar. I don't have a choice. So I'd like to figure out how to fix that. But
I have a whole classification system as to what each of the various different things are. Then I can look at, for my year, how much am I doing in science fiction? How much am I doing with family? How much, and that kind of thing. And then I can see, I guess I am looking for, I want to have balance. I don't want to do too much one more than the other. I don't want to neglect any of family. I should have something going on every month with Colleen's family or my family, that kind of thing. I sometimes, like, the default setting when I'm at the dentist office is not medical dental. So it's like I have to go and look at, oh, that got classified as books or something, whatever my so then when I find things, I have to correct it. And then sometimes I say, I should go look for every one of these and correct it. And once in a while, it's so much overhead. Can I just keep track of the fact that it's misclassified? Oh,
this stuff should be easy, right? It's all connected. Like Facebook, they changed it to where it's each individual event. I'm assuming because they want you to just get on Facebook and look at all your events there and use that as your calendar, which isn't realistic.
Fact, there's a good end of the podcast rant. I really am hating more and more. I have a number of news, if not apps, at least areas that I go to, because Facebook and Apple and various others haven't integrated into their stuff. I can't stand that they've got a 2 or 3 line headline, and all it's designed is to get you to go click to the website, click the link, instead of don't tell me Hollywood star dead. How could you not tell me who it is? That's just so obviously manipulative. And the more that I see it, that there's a whole new craft that comes from, how do I bait you instead of how do I inform you? I hate it. You know what I mean? In the days of, it compares this way, right? You could go through a newspaper and if you just glance around, you can see which of those column inches am I willing to read and which ones can I just flip to the next page, because the headline was the summary statement of what was to read, and then you can go into it further if you want. It wasn't only trying to lure you in. So I don't know if that's going to get fixed anytime soon, because so much of how the internet economy works is, did you click through? Did you get attention? Did you give it attention, et cetera, et cetera? And yet it's maddening. And especially now it's not only luring, it's actually misleading. Hey, star of Cheers is dead. And then it turns out to be someone that was in like 3 episodes. And I'm not ghoulish. I don't really want to know everybody who has died. But when they even just misspeak, when they tell you it's not true, I hate it.
There's two things that have exacerbated that issue. Number one is Apple's fault. and I say that kind of jokingly. They put the security on their phones and iPads and everything that you can choose not to be tracked and not have them. So everybody's scrambling. Android's now done the same, but all the advertisers are scrambling because they can't track like they used to. They can't set cookies. They can't get the click-throughs and all that. So they're losing data and they don't know. So they're doing these other things.
How do we charge the rates we do if we can justify the click-through rate and stuff?
Exactly.
Okay.
So the second thing that has made the issue worse is all the AI bots that are doing the writing. You don't know the number of articles I've clicked on to read, and I'm reading this going, this sentence doesn't make sense, and these are out of order, and they've repeated this. And the one that made me really laugh was they said, star changed their life when they learned these 2 words. Okay, I know it's clickbait. I'm going to check it out. So I click, I read the article, and they repeated. It said, and their life changed when they heard the 2 words. But nowhere in the article did it ever give the 2 words.
The 2 magic words, exactly.
Stupid AI bot.
Once in a while, I know that I got lured in. Like we've talked about some of these things before. They're just such artifacts of how the internet has grown over time. It used to be that you'd scroll through an entire article instead of having to go page by page,
clicking all the pictures
exactly, and get like the amount of advertising that they throw at you all around the article or the image or embedded in the text or whatever else it might be, that it's so much all about that. And I like refuse to click on any of those things because I know that that's why they lured me here. But now even things like, oh, I'm going to go watch a cute little puppy video. And it's just maddening how much it's larded with unnecessary, extraneous. It's not even, hey, if you came to see a puppy video, here's dog food things. It's more all of a sudden there's, you name it, political things or clothing things or whatever else it might be. That's just, I always thought that I'd be willing to give up a certain amount of privacy in order to have our advertisements be more targeted to me. So people talk about that it's spooky of, oh no, I mentioned that I was looking for ski poles and now I'm getting ski pole. I don't have a problem because I did that voluntarily to myself. It's very weird when they're wasting my time. And that's one of my big mantras is when I'm on Facebook or other social media, I won't waste people's time. It'll be something informative or something witty, but it won't just be crap that I'm trying to get other people to have a spoonful of it along with me. And those are the kinds of things that there's whole sites that I've stopped going to. I never click on the lowdown or something like that because every single one of them seems to be only the opportunity to get you to come in here where they can just splash you with things that you're not interested in. You know what I mean?
And that said,
brain overhead. Like, how do I keep track of which of the sites are good or bad? I really want to see that otter video, and yet I'm going to this pit.
That said, we've always made this podcast and the website that accompanies it a haven of getting geeky, nerdy, classically scientific, music topics of interest and recommendations. And these are the things we talked about. Go check them out. Here's activities. Here's the music, whatever. And
we choose what the links are. Exactly. Yeah.
And we've got clips that we've been putting up both on the website and on YouTube with the same thing. Here's a clip of what we talked about. We usually stay away from politics. We try and stay away from religion and those trigger topics and keep with the geeky, nerdy, fun, informative, something to think. We do trivia sometimes in that. That's
you bump up against those topics, but it's not just proselytizing. It's here's how a geek approaches that. They collect data. Anyway, okay.
So, that for everybody that's made it this far in this episode, check out the website. We've got recommendation links. When we mention something, we try and get it up there. We've got We're adding to our top 10 list. We're starting to push that again a little more.
That's right.
We've
That
got
really is our resolution for this year, is to like add some weight
yes.
to the website and other things.
Yeah.
Because I love doing this. Where are we like at episode 128? There's a cool
Yes.
binary number. We're way up there. Wow, that's a good body of work right there.
Yeah.
But there really should also be like the actionable things that like, hey, if we mentioned this is a really cool antivirus, what's your favorite? That it should be, we make it easy. Not all of, I have any number of friends that say, hey, listen, I take notes, then I go research, but getting it to be where it really is a click through for them, the convenience to our friends. It isn't about, oh, now we're going to advertise to you, but it is making it easy. You know what I mean? Making it
Right.
easy to make this a part of your life. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
We don't pick topics because it's the topic of the day to get clicks. We don't pick and recommend things because we're
Right.
going to make some kickback on it, and we don't really use it. Everything we talk about is what we're interested in, and we use and we've done and we've seen. Like the shows today, we're watching Jack Ryan.
right.
I've watched 24 and Designated Survivor. You listen to
Yeah,
Kansas
yeah.
all the time. That's why we talk about them.
That's right. That's right.
So,
In fact, once in a while we talk. So I love the idea of there's a vast amount of stuff out there that is still getting digitized and made available to the public that might have been out of print, if you will, for a while. I just got a box set of space rock that's curated by like the main guy from Osric Tentacles, one of my favorite rave bands, if you will. And it's like an 8 CD set, 6 or 8, for $24. They were like $3 or $4 a CD. So it's right in my sweet spot but not only is it a lot of stuff that I already knew enough about that I knew I'd like it. It's Tangerine Dream and it's Can and it's Faust and stuff like that. It's all kinds of other space rock practitioners that now I'm like, now I got to learn more about Zygmoid or whatever else it might be. So it's this wonderful exploration that I get to do. If I really like that cut, I get to go see what else they have out there. But I think I've mentioned when I write, I tend to not have songs on because words in the background tend to distract me from what I'm writing. Space rock, Osric Tentacles, all those things are so perfect for giving you energy, giving you ebb and flow, up and down, to inspire you to write things, but it doesn't give me the words, if you will. So this is going to be like my writing suite. I got 8 hours of space rock that I can listen to,
nice.
and once in a while it's interruptive, it's odd, and gives you too many beep boops and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, what a great find. And there continue to be those kinds of things. Like when I the other day talked about how much I love Kansas, for a lot of people, if you weren't there in the mid 70s, going on 50 years of Kansas, it's worth, not as a nostalgia play, but very much as this music didn't only impact me when I was young and form my life, it's still really good now. I get that music is one of those things, it's very generational, and it's very, people have very different favorites. I couldn't tell you about Maroon 5 and Blink 182, but some people love them to death,
Yeah.
and they couldn't care less about Kansas. And yet for those particular people that are looking for where's their quality music to be found, and now because it's older, it might be cheaper and you can get into it not for $15 a CD, but for 3, 4, 5. That's one of those things that when I go back and listen to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, it's like they really hold up well. There really are good songs, and there's good virtuoso musicianship, and it doesn't only sound of the period. If this came out today, it'd be like, man, that's great. That's like perfect arena rock bombast, and et cetera, et cetera. So maybe that's another, like when we talk about top 10 lists, it's funny. So a part of it is, have you ever done this? They really don't have these anymore. When I used to be in like a CD store, record stores became CD stores, I'd come across something like Thomas Dolby's Astronaut and Heretics for $3. And it'd be like, well, it's a shame that it's here because someone should have bought this at this price. Everyone should hear this album. I should buy this and send it to a friend. I've done that a couple times where it's like, at this price, this absolutely deserves to be more out in the world, that more people know about. Tears for Fears and Thomas Dolby and some of my favorites and heroes that some of them have gotten a lot of radio airplay, but there's a lot of others that they've never made it big, but they've made a career out of it. And so that's what I want to talk about once in a while is, man, if you're looking to start your year off, go listen to these Kansas albums. They're just so consistent. There's not a bad song like many albums are, 2 or 3 hits and a bunch of filler.
Yeah.
And instead, Kansas never made a clam. They were, every single song was the Kansas sound, but different enough in the, oh, oh, enough of gushing. I just love like Alan Parsons Project for a long time. Every single song on the album was good. There, I love that idea of the perfect album. Styx Equinox is like from needle drop to the end, fantastic album. Every single song great, and not every album is like that. So it's kind of like you should have a little list of perfect albums. Whereas if you're looking to get maximum musical enjoyment for your dollar, you have to go get Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, because it's got not only Born to Run, it's got, you know what I mean? It's got so much good stuff. Same with Darkness on the Edge of Town. Those two albums are just loaded with great music. Anyway.
Definitely. So real quick, before we go, you mentioned, did we already talk about Wednesday? That was cryptic. Exactly. I'm like, what?
And yeah, that is Wednesday the series, not next day.
Oh, no, so we have not. We have
a big schedule. No, it's another one of those that I've really been enjoying, and it's not for everyone. It's really the kind of like the Heathers thing, where every teen is sardonic, snarky. Not everyone, at least many at this Misfits school. So it'll be really good for all the kids who are Misfits that are saying it's okay to not be like everybody else. But that the Christina Ricci, in that one of those cool trends, she's actually in the series as one of the teachers, because she had immortalized that role in the Addams Family movies. Yes. And so I really liked it because it had a good mystery, it had good extra monsters. It's a school for misfits, but then there's all kinds of, who's the werewolf, who's the banshee, who's the whatever else it might be, not the banshee, the siren. That very fun, and it returned me on to Tim Burton. By that meaning, Colleen and I have certain directors that we've watched, like every single Alfred Hitchcock, every single Woody Allen, whatever else it might be. And I just realized I've seen a lot of Tim Burton, but not all. And I don't understand why I haven't, because I really love his style. He's quirky, he's odd. You can tell a Tim Burton movie often, even if they've been in various different genres. But here I go to Netflix, get all the Tim Burton movies, line them up, let's watch them all and watch them in chronological order so you can see his growth as an artist and stuff like that. So very fun. I'm happy for being reminded of what a craftsman he is. So watch Wednesday. It's really good.
Yeah, it's on my list. Yeah, we say that how often? Oh, it's on my list. We'll just add the next 50, because there's new Marvel coming out. There's the Bad Batch cartoon that I'm watching now. I've been watching the new Quantum Leap. I heard that they're doing a new Night Court. John Larroquette is in it, and
it appeared out of nowhere. Exactly. So
and what's her name that played Bernadette on Big Bang is the judge. So I'm just like, guys, just stop. The new season of Magnum's supposed to start soon. It's just stop. There's too much.
When am I going to sleep? I'll sleep when I'm dead. That's what I'm going to do.
And then Vicky was looking at my Blu-rays and DVDs, and she goes, oh, maybe I'll put this on. And she picked up Firefly, because I've talked about it. I said, no, we're going to watch that and sit and watch it, not while you're doing something else.
It's true. It's kind of funny. Oh, and one last thing. I know we're way over time. So I'm here in the hotel room. I'm on my laptop. They have a TV here that I worked on getting my Chromecast to work with it, but I'm discovering that one of its Achilles heels is when you're in a hotel that has the Wi-Fi, they have to put in a name and a password, and it has a specific app that all kind of drives that. It doesn't, you can't make the connection correctly. So instead, I like, when I'm working on something here, I have something on in the background. I discovered that there was a station, maybe Comedy Central, playing South Park, like one after the other. Stephen, they are so good.
Yeah, I love
they are so hilarious. They are so fearless in what they're willing to lampoon. And watching a bunch of them in a row, I was just reminded of, I've not seen as many as I have seen of South Park, even though I loved the show for a long time. So now I have, when I get done with the day and I'm back in my hotel room, I'm putting South Park on heavy rotation no matter what I'm doing, and I'm going to watch as many as I possibly can, because it's so funny.
So
it's
did you ever see the original little clip they did that was before the show?
Jesus Santa Claus versus Jesus. Exactly.
Oh my God, when I first saw that, I was laughing so hard for so long. And the funny thing is, in the show, because it was on Comedy Central, they would bleep out swear words. And then they did the movie and it was over the top and they didn't bleep things out. And the thing is, I found it funnier when they would have to restrict themselves and bleep things out. I think with that restriction, they tried to make the joke funnier and it was harder. Whereas when they could do anything they wanted, I just didn't think it was as funny.
That's a good way to look at it. It is sometimes you need those parameters that instead of it being so. One of the episodes was making fun of the Mormon religion because the Mormon family moves into South Park, and you could see where that was the inspiration, the genesis for the entire religion musical that they did, Mormon, and they had great songs, and you could just see where they must have watched their own episode and say, there's a lot still to be said here.
Trey,
there's a lot of legs here that we can exactly.
Let me just say, having been involved with the Mormon religion for a time, that show, that episode is like 100% factual. It's not even joking and pushing it over the top. And that's what makes it even funnier, is everything in there is exactly what they teach and that they believe. And it's not stretching it at all.
I hear you. That's so much how the episode struck me was they didn't have to do anything except tell the truth and just hold it up to say, this can't be real. This can't be the truth. And yet people are like wide-eyed going, yep, Maroney, yep, Joseph Smith. Yep.
and add music to it.
Exactly. Yeah, that was at first. It was like they know they're doing that. And of course, the repeating theme.
Yes. All right, man. Have fun in California. Stay dry.
Thank you much. I'm here through the weekend. I'll be back in home for next week.
I'll be here all week. Try the fish.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Steven's conversation on geek topics of the week.